Okay, well, I'll get started and folks can just come in as they come in. Welcome to all of our attendees. My name is Tressa Levasseur. My pronouns are she and her, and I am the Program and Community Engagement Manager at Folk Alliance International. I am a white woman wearing a blue shirt and a purple headband to hold back my messy hair in a room with a gray couch and a lot of curtains. Thank you for joining us for today's panel sponsored by Craft Services. Craft Services is a Pennsylvania-based music marketing agency that specializes in helping people run successful Kickstarter and crowdfunding projects. And to date, they have quarterbacked over 50 projects with a 98% success rate, totaling over $850,000. And you can find them listed on Kickstarter's experts page. Now, before we begin our discussion today, let's take a moment to acknowledge that we are joined by attendees and panelists from all over the place, all over not only Turtle Island, but this great vast planet that is spinning in a universe full of star matter. And let's take a deep breath in this moment. And in this breath, recognize that we are each breathing the air of a very specific location on the planet, a location to which we have come, or our parents or grandparents or ancestors have come, or have been for thousands of years. And that the ways in which we find ourselves in the spaces where we currently are multiple ways and multiple contexts. Some folks are settled, some folks were brought against their will to where they are. Some folks have been on the land that they are ancestrally for thousands of years. And let's recognize the importance and complexity of land acknowledgements in the context of online gathering, and just use this moment to acknowledge that we have a shared responsibility to make good of our short time on this beautiful planet, and to consider that our roles in reconciliation and decolonization and active allyship or accompliship, those are real roles that are action-based roles. I furthermore acknowledge myself that I'm joining you from the traditional territories of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, the Erie, the Huron-Wendat, and the Adirondack people on the beautiful shores of Lake Ontario. You can feel free to use this handy dandy tool that I'm about to drop in the chat for you, and that will help you to share with us where you are joining us from and the traditional and ongoing stewards of the land which you are settled upon. We hope that you'll share your thoughts and observations in the chat. If you have questions, I'm going to ask you that you put those in the Q&A box, and that can be found at the bottom of the screen where you see participants and chats. You'll also see a little Q&A icon, and we ask that you put the questions there so that our moderators can share them with our panelists during today's conversation. This panel will be available for viewing afterwards on our Folk Alliance YouTube channel, along with a transcript within 48 hours of airing or so. And now, without further ado, it is my great pleasure to introduce the moderators for today's discussion. The music industry background of both Jim Logrando and Steve Soboslai. Oh man, Steve, I forgot to get your pronunciation of your last name before we begin.
No worries. No worries. Could you believe I just got married and someone took that name? It's mind blowing.
I believe it, Steve. Steve and Jim, take it away.
Hi, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And we appreciate everybody taking the time to come in here and learn a little bit about crowdfunding from us. We have some things that we put together that we hope is going to be helpful for those of you who may have tried it before and didn't go as well as you wanted it to, or have always been interested in what crowdfunding could possibly do for you in your career. Talked a lot about what we've done. Craft Services is a company that Steve and I started a few years ago, the winter of 2017, and we've been running projects ever since, helping people all the time. We just recently had a project finished that was successful yesterday, and it belonged to George Parker, who's here on the panel with us, who's going to tell us
Congrats,
about
George.
his Indigenous cloud project. There are so many things that you can learn and so many things that you can do. And, we're going to talk about a lot of different stuff. We're going to break it down into a couple of different chapters. So we'll get through it. And if you have any questions, there is the Q&A box at the bottom of the Zoom. If you don't see it there, you might need to update your Zoom and get back in here. But if you leave a question for us in there, we'll see it and be able to answer it sort of in real time as this is going along. We're going to break it up into chapters, as I said, and the first chapter basically kind of covers what goes into making the decision to crowdfund. Like, what is the motivation behind starting? How do you know it's the right time? And like, what support do you need to go in to start planning that? So, looking at like the motivation that goes over, what is your situation like? That's the big question you have to ask yourself. Do you have new music? Do you want to make some sort of new item? Why do you need to put a project into the world? That's kind of what you need to think about. And the main thing that comes down to is the story that you have for this project, and is it compelling? A compelling story. I'm a person who is super anxious, so I made music that helps calm me down, and I thought that might help others get calmed down. That's a story that you can put behind. A story that's not compelling is something along the lines of, I put this music out last summer, and it'd be cool if I could pay for a publicist. So if I put a project together for this to tell people to help me pay for this publicist, maybe I'll get that money to make that work. Things like that never, ever work. So you really have to go into thinking like, what is this thing that I'm trying to do? And how can I get people motivated to help me do that? Which leads into, how do you know it's the right time to put it out there? Steve, if you want to share a little bit about that.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, everybody. Steve Soboslai. It's good to be here. Thanks so much for participating. How do you know it's the right time to run a Kickstarter or Indiegogo or crowdfunding project? We typically recommend planning it around your calendar. What do you have coming up? What do you want to stay away from? Going to Iceland for a month and gonna shut your phone off? Not a good time. Plan when you're going to be around and have time to dedicate time to it, but also when you have shows or happenings, milestones coming up, trying to use those as some kind of anchor or jumping off point is a great move. Stay away from Friday nights. People are probably out doing something. I've seen a lot. I pay attention a lot to the times when things happen on social media, as I'm sure y'all have too. And Friday nights, they're not great. That's my whole point there. Sometimes we see people will launch a Kickstarter project, and it almost launch a Kickstarter project, and then a week later during the project, they launch some big monster merch sale in the online store, which can cannibalize your efforts. We really recommend planning things so that you have enough light shed on the Kickstarter project so that people take it seriously. You're really trying to get people's trust here. People are busy, they have limited attention spans, and it's best to keep things simple. And it gets confusing when you're pushing multiple efforts. So passing it back to Jim.
Right. Well, thanks, Steve. Well, also another big question when it comes into kind of like, what is the right time? Not so much specifically like what is the right time of the week or the right time of the year to do it, but when is it right for me to put it out there? Well, that really is if you grow things like your mailing list and your social media following. And that's not just like you have to have 10,000 people that are on your Instagram before you can even possibly think about this. But you really have to have a network together for you, or at least a bit of a foundation before you can go out there and put a project into the world. A big thing that we deal with a lot when people come to us is they really think that a Kickstarter project, or just by nature of having an idea that they think people might like, that they can throw that project up on there. And as soon as people see it, they're going to love it so much that there's no way they couldn't be compelled to pull their wallet out and support them with what that project is. And that absolutely does not happen. The only way that could happen is if you have some crazy invention that everybody wants and just makes sense in the one word name that it is, and then you had a multi-million-dollar budget to get the word out there. So you really have to build this stuff up ahead of time, and taking the time to get people together. And it doesn't have to be a massive amount of people. If you have 100 fans that you know are dedicated fans that care about you, that's enough to put together something together that makes sense. And you can do it. It just takes time, and that leads a lot to talking about what you need to start this planning. Well, I talked about prepping your audience. And now what that goes into is like, if you don't have a newsletter list, which is I'm talking about an email list, you should really think about starting to get one and putting that together. Even better, if you can get one of these text-based apps that's out there to start collecting people's phone numbers, that might be the best way to reach fans nowadays, is sending them a text to tell them about a show or something special. I mean, as long as it's not intrusive, of course, your project when that is going on. But why we say this
Panelists, do you have text lists?
Nope, I'm still old school. I still rely on the old email list there.
Email.
Nice. Well, the email list is absolutely important. Text is sort of what we've started to notice is the younger based fan groups are bad with email and don't have any issues with text. So texting is like the young wave of the future, in and of the sense that the email news list is something that people are always checking and noticing. Why this is important and why this is good. It's a two-pronged strategy. One is we've seen so many projects from nature of what we've done at Craft Services and plus my time working at Kickstarter behind the scenes. I've seen the data of where the backers come from, and the majority of the backers come from somebody's email list, meaning the highest percentage of backers usually comes from whatever mailing list goes out. Why might that be the case? Well, as long as people open that email, it's going into email boxes and people are seeing it. Unlike if you're on Facebook and you have 1,000 fans, you'll never reach 1,000 fans with whatever you post unless you pay to boost it to reach everybody, or you create a post that's so engaging that it reaches a high percentage of the people that you have. You might not have to pay. That's what you have to overcome with it. So when you have these ways to get directly into people, sending them an email, sending them a text, it's just a great way to break out of those algorithms and save yourself some advertising money in the process. You also, if you have a newsletter now and you haven't done it in a while, that's good. Just reactivate it, because leading into your project, you always want to make sure that you're ramping it up to a level that people are ready to receive what you're putting out there into the world. Meaning you never want to drop a project cold on folks where it just comes out of the blue and all of a sudden you're asking people for money. It usually takes a while for people to warm up. And the thing that folks kind of don't realize, or just you realize when you're in the moment, is Kickstarter projects or crowdfunding projects in general are on the clock. Each day that goes by is one less day that you have to get somebody to support your idea and project. So the more time it takes for them to understand what's happening and get there, it's just time that you're wasting on the clock. So we try to do a lot of the heavy lifting and the promotional stuff ahead of time. So when the doors are open for the project, there are people there and ready to help support. So that's a great way to kind of get people excited. And when the project comes out, you're talking to them, weeks ahead of time. It helps tease the future, and you're just building rapport for people for when the project is going, it can be successful, or after the project is over, when you're leading them to that album release or that Christmas merch sale that's coming down the road or whatever, the goodwill keeps on going. I want to turn it over here a second to George to talk a little bit about himself and the project that you just did, and kind of speak to the audience a little bit about what kind of went in here in the early stages as you were like, what was on your mind, George, whenever you decided that running a Kickstarter project was for you?
Hi everyone. I'm happy to be here with you all today. My name is George Parker, and I've been in the Indigenous music business for about 30 years now. And getting things together to get this.
He's a mogul, everybody.
To get the Kickstarter campaign together, I reached out to Jim and Steve here about probably, I would say, 4 or 5 months ago, and we began talking about the whole project and that. I told them, my storyline, being in the business so many years, doing CD sales, how the CD sales were dropping over the years, and I needed a new platform to get, the music out there of the Indigenous people. And we started an Indigenous Cloud website. It's a streaming service right now, but the Kickstarter campaign came about because we do need some upgrades to, bring the service, to be a little more user friendly, and, and to keep the people around. Over the years, seeing so many stories and hearing music from so many different Indigenous artists, this has always been the dream of mine, is to bring a platform like this together. And, it takes a lot of work to do it, to get things out. One of the big things, people, is to get your database together, your email list. That's what I found out. That's going to be the key to everything, is to have your email list in place. Because they're the ones that are going to be supporting you. And one of the other things is you got to be on hand daily, to push it out to social media. Get your friends involved, family, people that you've worked with through the years and you've known. Just get it out to them, and once they hear your story, hopefully they passing it on to people that they know, and the snowball effect starts to happen. We hit our goal yesterday. I think we did about 111% of our goal. So we're quite pleased with that. That's going to do wonders into getting us to where we want to be. Our goal is to be the Indigenous Spotify of Indigenous people. Right now, we've got a catalog base of about my guess is about 1,000 Indigenous albums that will be online, over the next few months. There is some up there right now, and our goal is just keep producing and promoting and have a platform out there to so that people can hear this great talent that's going on. During the pandemic, if you're on social media, especially on the Indigenous social media platforms and that, they're just unbelievable amount of talent that's out there, singers and musicians, just coming forward and doing a show when people couldn't get out, and so our goal is, to have a place for them to come, do their recordings, get it out there and let the world hear. We've got a lot of languages that we're losing over the years, Indigenous languages, and this is a way, to help preserve that, when they're singing in their languages, the different genres. We've got powwow music, we've got Native American church music, we've got rock, we've got blues, we've got Métis fiddle. There's just so much music out there. And we just want a home for them to feel comfortable with, and somebody out there that can support and push their titles out for them. And that's kind of what I've been about for the last 30 years, is just doing my best to get the word out for the different artists and people out there. And the Kickstarter campaign was amazing. It was a learning experience, and the amount of response that we got was great. The words of encouragement from people all around the world, giving us support and letting us know how our product is. It's a big lift of encouragement, when you hear stuff like that happening.
Absolutely. And George, I wanted to add one thing with it that really goes into kind of it helps seg into the next part, which is planning. George did a really good job of looking within his network, but expanding, meaning a partner that he worked with that was really helpful and helped spreading the message about his project was a website called powwows.com, which is specifically helps lead into powwow culture and different songs and contests and all different things. That network was not George's network, but was somebody that was symbiotic and helpful to what he was doing, that he worked the stuff out ahead of time. So when the project was out there, it was like not only the Indigenous Cloud network that existed, there was the powwows.com network, and that cascaded into different parts. And that's how you can end up with a project that, reaches its goal or goes over it by the time that it's over.
That was a very fruitful partnership. That's always nice to see. That's something everybody wants, but is hard to find some audience you can tap into, get them to share your project in a newsletter. And again, as far as planning goes, there's so much to plan for, and we're going to get into that here in a second. But you really got to dial in the basics and get the basics right, which takes a lot of work. And then George went beyond that, organizing a street team, organizing artist share campaigns, and to me, that's a lot of the icing on the cake. So George, you did a great job. Congrats again on your project. So what are the key elements of a solid plan? That's what we do at Craft Services. Is we basically walk clients through every step of running a project from the beginning to the end. Some people even keep us on to help fulfill the project, as far as, you know, even pick, pack, and shipping the rewards and whatnot. So we try to boil this down into a very concise bulleted list. Here are the keys to a successful campaign. Number one, you have to nail your project video. Your video is the visual representation of your project, and getting the video right, part of getting the video right is getting your story right, and getting the story right, that trickles down to the rest of the campaign, you know, being nice and uniform. My preference with videos, go watch some Kickstarter videos. I bet you haven't seen them in a while. We're getting beyond this whole, but we need your help attitude and mentality. I think a lot of people, you know, we talk and we just say things that we copy up, we mimic other people. We can't help it, but it doesn't have to be that way. I love Kickstarter project videos and Indiegogo videos that come from a very artistic place and almost feel more like a cinematic trailer about this next chapter of your career, rather than some kind of nuts and bolts business plan. I don't care how much your mastering costs so much. Actually, I care, because I'm a musician. That's actually interesting to me. But to most people, mastering, not super interesting. So nail the project video, nail the story. Consistency across platforms. People were very aware of consistency. If I see you post something on one platform about something that you're doing, but you don't do it on all of your platforms, now it's not something that I realize I'm realizing, it's probably more on a subconscious level, but make your message uniform across all your platforms. Yeah, but I don't really use my Twitter. I never use it. Delete it, get rid of it. Why do you have that? You know, it's gonna confuse people. Let's keep it simple. Social media planning is next. George in Indigenous Cloud, running a Kickstarter project. George, you learned so much about Facebook. We're all just learning so much about Facebook. I remember working with Katie and how much we learned about Facebook and social media platforms and how to make the best of your time. But social media planning is key. Get your posts together in advance. You don't want it to be day 10 of your campaign and you're waking up and you're like, what is happening today? You know, put together a little calendar, map the stuff out, make a folder of your assets, prepare what you have to do, and it'll be helpful to see everything there in front of you and say like, oh wait, these posts, like when I look at these, I'm just like hard selling this campaign to these people. You know, find creative ways to say things, make it fun, you know, make it you know, a month or so long of just celebrating what you're doing, focus on the future. It's going to be great. And then these last two things, these are things that, well, number one is get the word out, period. If you're posting stuff, I sent out a newsletter, I made a Facebook post, nobody's reacting. Oh, well, my campaign's not going to do good. You have to get the job done. Find other ways, find other channels. You definitely have to hustle with these things, but there is a lot of planning that you can do so you're not freaking out during the thing. Me and Jim are never freaking out. The first campaign we ever did was for my band Punchline, and that was a freak out fest, and we've learned so much since then. And the last thing is to make it a spectacle. Show people that this is a big deal and important to you. If you don't show them it's a big deal, they're not going to take it as seriously. Cultivating trust and communicating the message is very important. Make it a big deal, make it a spectacle, and do everything in your power to you know, just have fun with it. That is the end of this section.
Totally. Well, so okay, so that was great, Stephen. Thanks for sharing those tips. It goes into just kind of summing up, like, what research do you need to do when you go into running a project? And that is find a good reference for videos and projects. Are you doing a thing about an album, a brand new album that's about something? Find some things that are connected to that, a country album, Americana album that works for you. Look up the
See
Ted
what other
Leo
people
project.
are doing that you like.
the Ted Leo project that happened a few years ago, his album, or I mean, his video for his project was awesome because it was basically, here's what I'm putting together. It never mentioned the word money, like I need your help to do this, any of that stuff. It's perfect to just get out there what you're trying to get people to do for you, and don't waste time adding minutes and stuff to videos with fluff. Just get the point and do that. You got to research the costs for the rewards, and you got to think about that when you go into it, because there's been so many folks that we've talked to where they like just come up with an idea but don't realize that it costs more. They're like, a glass or a coffee mug has a price. You got to think about that and what it weighs when you put it in something, when you charge people the shipping, because you have to make sure that all of the costs work out, or else you're going to end up spending what you need to raise in the project to make the rewards for people. And that's not what you want to find yourself doing, because the rewards aren't the reason that a project exists. That's a good place to kind of jump and break in here and say, is a lot of folks ask us, like, well, I have to come up with a bazillion rewards to put on this. Projects are not about the rewards. They're about what is coming out at the end of the project, the album, the tour van, the thing that's going to be there. So putting stuff in there that works to help that goal, that's what you're looking for, not 100 different things that are in there. And that's what people get tripped up with. And then they try to come up with all these different things that cost all this money, and that it never adds up. So you got to be careful with that when it goes into researching those costs. And then also learn how the crowdfunding platform that you're choosing works. Kickstarter is all or nothing, which means you may have a goal of $10,000. You have to reach that $10,000 or you get zero. So plan accordingly. If you can't make it that far, and if you know you can't make it that far, think of making it a little less and push it up that way with a stretch goal. And make sure that you have all that in place, because you have to figure out there's fees, there's taxes involved, there's all kinds of stuff. Learn the ins and outs of the platform that you're going to use. So that leads into setting up timelines and different planning. I wanted to take a second and turn it over to Chris to talk a little bit about your project that you did, because you had an awesome video, you had a successful project, you had to put a lot of plans into what you were doing. I'd love for you to kind of share with everybody kind of what was in your head when you were putting it together, and about some of those, the video and the rewards. Talk about those if you could.
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, hi everybody. Chris Matthews, social justice singer-songwriter from North Carolina. DC is home for me now. And yeah, in October of last year, in the middle of the pandemic, I launched a Kickstarter for a new album of social justice music. And it was successfully funded. Our goal was 15,000, and I think we ended up raising 22,000. And so this is kind of like the application of all of those awesome things that Jim and Steve were kind of talking to you about. So, it was very, very scary to think about, okay, am I gonna do this? Are we gonna do this thing in the middle of a pandemic where like people are losing their jobs? Are we gonna launch this Kickstarter? And I had originally planned to launch it in like May, but then the pandemic hit. And so I'm sitting there thinking, well, I don't have a job. And I know a lot of my fans have been impacted by this. So like it just felt so tone deaf to try to launch it at that point. But it was like as the months went on and the way things were kind of unfolding in the world, because of the subject matter of this album, it was like I could not shake this feeling that it was the right time to do it. And so just as they kind of implied, you don't want to just spring it on your fans, be like, surprise, we're doing a Kickstarter like in the middle of a pandemic, yay. Like you don't want to do that. So it was like almost putting out feelers to my fans to say, guys, I'm really feeling pulled to launch this. I'm really feeling pulled to share these songs. What are you thinking? How are we feeling? And it was like the response always was just like, we've got you, we will catch you. And so I jumped and they did. And it's kind of that relationship that you spend all of those years building with your fans. It's for moments like that. It's because you all kind of create this rapport together. They're your community. So when you get ready to do something major, like launch a Kickstarter or a crowdfunding campaign for a new project or for what have you, they're in your corner because they've been in your corner your whole time. That's why you maintain that relationship. That's why you keep that connection with them. And so, yeah, we launched it in October. It was one of the bigger ones that I've done, and it was the shortest one that I've done, which was also very scary. But there's one thing I have the advantage of living with Heather May, who actually does social media and crowdfunding advocacy, I'll say, and consulting as well. And she always says it's better when it's a shorter period of time, because then it's less likely to get lost in people's minds and in their backgrounds of like their busy lives and stuff. And it was true. It was absolutely true. It was very, very successful. And it was because I feel like the message was really clearly defined. The point of the album was about hope. I kept referencing this Ani DeFranco quote that said people used to make records as in a record of an event, and that the purpose of this album was kind of record the event of like these past 4 years that we had lived through, and so many people could relate to that, and it resonated with people so deeply. And of course the music was good, so they were okay with that too. So it's so important when we talk about the planning, the pre-planning, when you get ready to launch one of these. It really is so important. Some of that stuff feels so big picture and scary, but it's kind of the stuff that we as artists do anyway. We cultivate these relationships with our fans even when we aren't thinking of it as like a transactional thing. We love them, they love us, so like we're cultivating these relationships. But when it comes time to do something like this, that's kind of where those relationships pay dividends. And so yeah, I mean, I was very, very fortunate to have such an incredible group of fans in my corner for launching this, but it was also a lot of really smart planning and good work that went into making sure that it was successful as well. So I hope we'll get to talk about some specifics of that for any questions that you all might have, as far as like, how do you get to that? How do you figure out what those specifics look like for you specifically in your brand?
Right. That's good. And Chris, well, let me ask you real quick. Is there anything that you would have done differently in your planning process now, in the hindsight of having run your project?
I will say I probably could have been better about actually utilizing my email list. I got really lucky in that a lot of my folks, because I sing folk music, my fan base is a little bit older, and so a lot of them are still on Facebook and not necessarily on like Instagram or anything like that, or like doing the text message stuff. And so because of that, I have such a high bit of what is it? What's the metric on Facebook that they use, where they're like, this has got like 90% da 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 da. So like with my fans on
Zuckerberg.
Facebook. No, definitely not. Whose name we shall not say. It definitely was easier to utilize Facebook just because they were so used to us interacting on Facebook. And so I will say, your fans as artists. So like if you're reaching them consistently on Facebook and they're like really, really engaged with you, engagement, that's the word I was looking for. I got it myself. If your engagement is really high on Facebook, utilize that as like your primary. If your engagement is super high on your email list, utilize that as your primary, and then still, find those other things as like your secondary and tertiary. But for me, I got really lucky because the type of music that I sing, a lot of Facebook groups that are like really, really involved in like social justice and advocacy kind of like keep up with my music. And so I got some boost from shares of songs that like brought in a bunch of new fans. So I didn't have to rely as heavily on my email list. But yeah, going forward, I definitely am. That's my to-do list for 2021, is to be much more diligent about my email list.
Very cool. Well, nice. Well, I'm glad that you mentioned that and talk about engaging, because that's a great seg into the next chapter of what we have, which is when we talk about going live and what's going on exact when that project is out there, and what's the best way to make sure that people are engaging with you and making sure that you're getting backers to that project when it's out there in the world. And so, the things that you can do to best make an impact, like what kind of tools can you use? Well, Steve mentioned something before, which is planning everything out on some sort of calendar. Having something together that lets you plan what you're going to post, so it ahead of time, is going to be very helpful for you to be able to jump in and grab it. But then that content, needs to be engaging. Think of stuff that's going to get people to respond in a way. Like, I know it's not necessarily ties into most music, but when you ask a question like, what are you watching on Netflix? You always get people to drop comments in there and there. And if you're responding, that's a way to trick the algorithm, because when it sees that there's a bunch of things that are getting comments, it'll share that with more of your people without you having to pay to boost it. And it's a way to kind of like tie in there. We like to try to do things where we ask questions for people to respond and then add a PS about the project. So it, is like the post is not about the project, but then there is a link or an update to what the percentage is, but it allows people to share that movie or share whatever, but then still have a little like project inception going on with it. That's something we like to do. Newsletters we talked about, texting we talked about. Those are the most effective ways outside of just putting that stuff online that people will engage with. Now, a question. Now we're going to turn it over here a second to Katie, who's going to talk a lot about her project and what she was going on with her when it was live. But sometimes people are wondering, like, what do you do if the project isn't gaining traction? Well, don't be discouraged. Be aware that something's wrong. Don't act like nothing is going on and everything is going to work itself out. You can definitely pivot to what's happening. Projects are going to have two major apexes, and it's up to you to fill in the rest of the gaps with creativity. And if you're an artist or a creator, that's exactly where you live, in a creative space.
The apex is at the beginning, and then at the end.
That's right. People will give in the beginning, and they're going to give when you say there's 24 hours left. So what you do in between that time to keep people engaged and interested is that's where you make your most amount of money to take it from your goal to 100, 200, 300% of whatever that goal is. Planning out to have those things happen throughout that week. And that's, kind of like the support you need to start planning is having everything kind of thought ahead of time and being very organized. Leading into that, I wanted to bring Katie up so you can talk a little bit about, how you prepared for your project going live and how things sort of operated for you while it was live. Like, I guess a big question would be, do you feel like it went according to plan, or did it not go according to plan?
I think it went according to plan, even though that when you launch a Kickstarter, you are also planning to evolve along the way. You're accepting that there's going to be anomalies and events and engagement and things that are going to happen along the way that you cannot plan for, that you just have to embrace and work around. I did probably about a month, maybe even 2 months of planning before launching in May, and it concluded at the beginning of June. I think it was a fully active, like 30 days in bulk. Honestly, the hardest part, like what you were touching on about engaging people throughout the entire campaign, is, and obviously I worked very closely with craft services, and they gave me like a wonderful outline of, what to post, when to post, and things like that. And I took it and went, like, much like what Chris was saying earlier about knowing your fans. Like, you have to know your fans and know your audience. If you don't, you can be very general, but I know my fans, and they'll know when I'm not being authentic, and they'll kind of scold me on it. Or I will feel personally weirded out by saying something, explaining something, showing something, pushing something, quote unquote, selling them something that I don't feel comfortable with using certain verbiage, etc. I put my campaign out there, and technically it was 300% funded, which is amazing. I did set the bar a lot lower than what I technically wanted, but I also knew we're in a pandemic. I'm not blind to what's been going on. And I only launched a couple of months ago, and we'd been in the pandemic for a year, and I'd been keeping active with my fan base. I'd been doing monthly online concerts. I'd been keeping engaged with new singles coming out, and I never stopped my engagement, but I knew my audience and I knew which platforms worked best for me. And I had been hinting along the way here and there throughout 2020 of whether I should go with Kickstarter, whether I should go with Patreon. And there's pros and cons to all of these things, of course. And because I was doing my monthly shows on another platform, I was like, I don't know if I want to deal with the Patreon thing. And my biggest fear throughout being in lockdown was wearing people out, the overstimulation of being in a fully computerized. If you're not on your phone, you're on your computer. If you're going to work, you're on your computer. Everything is just this isolated view of life. So I didn't want to wear people out. So I decided to go with Kickstarter and just give it this one big push. And also, to let people know this is this one thing I'm very, very passionate about. And it's not this passion that's going to go on forever and ever. It's this passion about this one thing right now. And then it always leads you to down the road, I can do another project that I'm passionate about. And this is my third crowdfunder that was successful. I feel really confident about the way that things went and adapting along the way.
Very, very nice. Yeah, most people who return to crowdfunding and run follow up campaigns, they just get bigger and better. You just keep learning, your base keeps growing, and it's great to go back to, on Kickstarter, for example, you can send out a Kickstarter update at any time to all the people that backed your project. So when you launch a new project, you can send out an update from your old project telling people about the new project, which is extremely helpful. I also wanted to say, back to something we were talking about, the length of campaigns. Again, you don't want the project to be too long because you have to have the things happening during it. You're creating a sense of urgency. That's part of what makes them alluring or exciting, is that there's a sense of urgency. With Kickstarter, there's this all or nothing premise. And so while you might think that 60 days just means more time for the fans to support, unless you have the exciting things happening and can keep the tent propped up, it's gonna be pretty challenging. Getting into the last section here, and then I think we have some questions. George, I want to turn this over to you, but how do you feel now that your campaign is finished?
It's been an exciting few months, I can tell you that, and I actually feel relieved that the campaign is finished. It was kind of always on my toes every day, being there, and wondering whether it's going to go great, and like you said, it happened at the beginning. That's when a lot of people supported, right, day one, day two, and then yesterday, as the campaign was ending, I think we had about 30% just yesterday alone. So it's a bit of a relief to get it done, and but we're looking forward, moving forward on other projects and things now. So it was an experience, and we would probably do it again at some point.
Nice. Well, what would be the top piece of advice you would give someone considering to undertake a crowdfunding campaign?
Just that you've got to be there, hands-on for the whole thing. It's some time that you've got to put in and do the work on. You get support from craft services or people like you and that, but ultimately it comes down to you and your fan base. Engaging with them as much as possible. And
nice.
It's just a daily thing that you have to go through.
Right. Every project kind of hits a lull, like George was saying. People give in the beginning, people give in the end. There are certainly things along the way that can be exciting, where there's new surges of backing. But when it's the middle of the campaign and there's this natural lull, what we tell people is, don't be discouraged. Keep making the posts. Try to make them engaging and raise the awareness, because what matters is that people are there by the end of the campaign, that they back the project. And sometimes people might need to see you post about it 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. Oh wow, Katie really wants this to happen. Like I understand. Now I see what's going on. So give it time and don't be discouraged.
What I noticed through the campaign is we got a lot of followers as we're going through, and this towards the end of the campaign is when the followers really started converting. That I noticed, the last few days is when the followers, started to convert into backers.
Right on. Makes sense. Katie, same question to you. So if you would, what's a top piece of advice that you would give to someone considering undertaking a crowdfunding campaign now that yours is finished?
Well, ultimately, you've got to be the most passionate person in the room, whatever room, the only room that you're in, the room that you've been in for the last year and a half. Your passion is going to be the thing that inspires everyone else to sort of jump on board, because that's really what you're doing. You are the person that's creating something, and you're asking people to join you on this ride that you're going on with or without them. I think to sort of tie into like knowing your audience as well, I think one of my biggest or most highly engaged social posts had nothing to do with the project. It just had the, like what you do, it's like the PS blah 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 project at the
Hmm.
end of the thing.
Right.
Was a project that was a post that went on and on and on about something that had happened to me on tour, but I just wanted to share a story. And because I'd done all these posts leading up to that post, like my fans are obviously clicking on there, they're watching what I'm doing, they're watching what I'm doing, they're just wanting to see if something new and exciting happens. They know what I'm talking about, but because this was a story about something else, I think I had almost 200% more than what I would normally have on posts in terms of engagement. And I got a little bit of an uptick with, people that were jumping on board to pledge as well. But I think you just have to be authentic along the way and don't get frustrated, because you are going to have that peak. You are going to have that lull. It's going to happen. But know that people are still watching everything that you're doing, and you can't think of it as this huge like uphill, like it's just going to be consistent, blah, 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 blah. It's not, it's going to be difficult, but you have to stay motivated. If you can't stay motivated for a month, like what are you doing in this business, like in general? Like,
That's true.
so like what you guys said before, plan your post, plan as much ahead as possible. Like I just created a bunch of content not knowing exactly when I was going to post what and when what, but I already had stuff together and I have a huge resource of things to pull from. But stay passionate, because your passion's going to be the thing that and for me, like my fans know that I'm authentic, so for me it's passion and authenticity. Those are the things that the fans are really buying. They're not necessarily buying the thing you're selling, they're buying into what you are as a brand and an entity. They just want to be on that. Yeah.
Truer words were never spoken, and your project definitely bled authenticity. So if anybody looks at it and checks it out, you'll see that Katie is in it through and through. And it was that, I mean, you said it very well. Thank you. And now, Chris, I can't escape. You got the question coming to you. Now, everyone, we do have some Q&A that we've got your answers in here, or these questions that we're going to jump to in a second. But I don't want us to get over without Chris saying what her advice is to folks that they would do if they're running a project.
Definitely seconding what Katie said, for sure. Authenticity is such an important part of what we do. It's why people are drawn to us. There are so many singer-songwriters in this world, but we have our fans. They love us. They love the music that we do, the art that we create. So be authentic, be yourself, because that's why they're there in your corner in the first place, because of who you are, because of the art that you make. So even when you're doing your crowdfunding, still you want to be authentic, because they'll be much more inspired by that. I mean, they already are inspired by you. That's why they're there. That's why they've been with you all this time. And then most importantly, do the work ahead of time to get yourself organized. It's so important. Crowdfunding can be such an overwhelming thing, especially for so many of us who don't like to do that stuff, that capitalism money stuff. Like we just want to make our art and that's it. But the organization part of it is so incredibly important, so that you don't get overwhelmed yourself, and that you can actually keep a good headspace for the duration of the project, because that's what it takes to get it done and get it done successfully. So pre-game.
Very cool. Now that's the truth. Having it ahead of time, it just helps you, like, you can map it out. I mean, it happens all the time. We map stuff out that never happens, but at least we mapped it out so we know where we're going to be able to shuffle things around whenever it comes up. Because I mean, you can only say support my Kickstarter so many ways before people tune out, and it's like one way. So you have to come up with so many different things to do to get people to stay into it, and that makes total sense. So thank you so much. Cool. All right. So we're going to top this over to some questions that we have going on in here. We've been asked a question from Corky Siegel, which boils down to, you have a fan base of about 3,000 on your email list, and you've put up your own crowdfunding on your website. It's been there for about a year. It's done well. And the question is, you think it's time to move over to a commercial platform like a Kickstarter or an Indiegogo, if you think it'll work a lot better. Otherwise, you'll promote it where it is, right? This is a great question. Why would I do something on a platform like Kickstarter or Indiegogo versus anything else that I do in the world on my own thing? I'd love to turn it over to Katie or Chris, if either of you have an answer that you think for them of why they should do something on a bigger platform versus
for me,
in your own backyard.
It's exclusively just because of the organizational component. So like every crowdfunding project I've done has always been on Kickstarter. The platform is very user friendly for me as the artist, as far as keeping everything organized. Like who did the pledging? Do I have their information? I need to send it to them then. So like for me, it's very beneficial just because everything is so well organized. So when it comes to the end of it and actually fulfilling those rewards and stuff, it's just so much easier for me. So I've always been a fan of them. One, because of the platform being so user friendly and easy to use, and then also for keeping things so organized as far as making sure the rewards are fulfilled at the end.
Very cool. I don't know, Katie, do you have anything to add in terms of, considering using a major platform or not?
I just have to go with what Chris said. It's just the organization and the fact. I mean, you may get a few people because you're on a bigger platform. Maybe the platform chooses to feature your project. You may get some passerbys that you see that stumble across, like go to to Kickstarter to seek something else out and stumble across you and go, oh, this, or they go there to see their friend's thing and stumble across you, and you may get a few extra people that jump aboard just because they're there. So I think you've got just extra little opportunity there too.
Right. I would add to that, a place like Kickstarter is a household name in of the sense that people trust buying something from Amazon. They trust buying something at Kickstarter, depending on where you have your thing set up with. If it seems, kind of strange, maybe it would be something that they wouldn't want to support or use because of confusion or whatever. But it just depends on your audience if you want to be able to tap into one of those places. A project like Indigenous Cloud did very well for Kickstarter to support in different promotional aspects of putting it in places. And if you have something that speaks to a greater good, you could leverage the fact that they have millions of people there that could see it. So that might be something to consider for that. So thank you, Corky, for that question. All right, next question that we have in here is in regards to, it has to do with getting grant stuff. So I want to ask it to you, George, because you're in Canada. I'm sure you've dealt with dealing with applying for grants. Okay, it's from Claire Copeland. Claire, thank you. You asked, do you think it's a good idea to launch a Kickstarter even if you've applied for some big grants when you're not sure if you'll get them, like a way to cover your bases? If I did end up getting a grant, would it be weird to refund the Kickstarter backers the money? A question I've been wondering about. Now, I have an opinion on this, but George, I'd love for you to speak to anything with it in regards to grants and Kickstarters, because I'm sure that you're in that world.
Well, I think, if you go out and go after a grant, and you do manage to get it, I would think, your Kickstarter, people that are supporting you on Kickstarter would be more than happy to let you keep the money as long as, you're doing what you said you would do. I don't see that there would be a big, a big problem with, going ahead and keeping the funds that you raised through Kickstarter as well as the granting money. It would just make your project that much better.
Very cool. Great answer. Hopefully that's helpful for you. I think that it wouldn't, having the grant money and having a project, I think you could do both things. In terms of refunding people with it, I feel like you could probably, that's not something you wouldn't necessarily have to refund people if you got the grant after you did the project. You repurpose the money in other ways. It's helping support your career. And I think that you'll find that people will be very supportive of that. We have a few minutes left for a couple more questions. Hopefully we can get to all of them. If we don't, if you've asked the question, I can go in here and you can email it to us at hello@enjoycraftservices.com or drop onto our website and you can send us the message or the question through there if we didn't get to it. But we'll try to answer it as we can. I have a question here from Heather May. I'm a crowdfunding coach for women and LGBTQ plus artists. How do you help your artists budget for shipping and fees? Okay, well, to me, that's a simple question in the sense of Kickstarter. You can add the shipping to every reward that you put in there. So you come up with whatever your reward amount is in tier. Let's say we use, for example, we like a tier of t-shirts that's $35. And in that tier, you get a t-shirt and you get a couple of other things that are digital or something with it that really allows the cost to just be that t-shirt. And then we're asking for $35. So you get a big amount for that in there. On top of that $35, you also have to add whatever the appropriate amount of shipping is that goes into it. So therefore, you're not giving somebody an all-inclusive price that includes the shipping. You're getting to pay that extra for wherever it is to wherever it goes in the world. So when that's all in there, the big thing is just you got to be organized enough that you're getting all this money that comes in. you have to separate it out so you know that this much is earmarked for shipping and this much is earmarked for whatever else. And you'll get some deals by sending stuff media mail and wherever else. So you'll probably end up, making some extra with the shipping and whatnot. But it is something separate that's built into it that you can keep separate and organize for.
Yeah, that's definitely a thing that I got much better at on my than I was at my first couple of Kickstarters. I would always forget to like actually allocate for the amount that it was going to take to like buy the envelope, pay for the postage, do all the shipping like in the earlier days of Kickstarter. So, yes, for all the musicians who are just starting to like really dig into this crowdfunding, like we cannot stress enough the organizational aspect of it is so important so that you don't fall into these little pitfalls like not actually budgeting for things like shipping supplies and stuff like that in your big dollar amount.
Yep, that's the case. Sometimes people are like, "Oh, envelopes! I didn't even think about that." Oh man, and then it can be tough. Next question coming from my Bloomfield. What are the current thoughts on the best time of day to do social media postings? Are different days better or worse on different platforms, or does it mostly depend on each audience? Katie, I'm sending this question your direction.
These guys know that I do a lot of social media stuff, so that they're just like, and go. I really want to say that, I mean, you pay attention to your audience if you know your audience, and just, I mean, you can always go through like your last, handful of social posts and check engagement and see check your insights on Instagram, check your insights on Facebook and see what's what for you. But in general, and it's usually your bubble of window is between, and I hate to say it, between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m., generally Monday to Friday, but Tuesday to Thursday are your good days. Sundays is usually like, wah. Saturdays can be a bit wah too, but I still think Saturday mornings can be good. I mean, you'll get people that, of course, it's like first thing in the morning before people go to work, they're going to be checking their phones, but the majority of people start to tune in the most and spend the most amount of time on social media when they're a couple of hours into their workday and they're starting to zone out and get sort of, kooky and bored. And that's when they'll start to be like, cats and music and what did I miss and news. That's in general though, but a good window is 10 a.m. to, 2 or 3 p.m. And again, it's time zone related. That's why I say there's such a broad window. For me in general, I'm in central time because I'm based in Nashville, but most of my posts I do around sort of 10 a.m. just because I know it's a little bit later in Eastern time and whatnot. But that's me, and that's where I go for it. That's my go-to.
Great answer. Thank you, Katie. We have a few minutes left. We have a couple of questions we're going to try to get to. Again, if we don't get to all of them, I want to thank you guys for taking the time to come out and hang with us. I think we're going to end on this one question, which is from Peter Lendorf, which is, what are the differences between the platforms? Well, that's a big question that you kind of have to look into and sort of research the nuances. But there's really three major platforms people use: Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and GoFundMe. GoFundMe is set up for I think of it as the neighborhoods that you want to live in. Kickstarter is set up specifically and only for creative projects. You have to have a book, a game, a music, something creative to use it, but it's an all or nothing premise. Indiegogo is kind of in between. You can put whatever you want on there, and there's some different rules where it's not 10,000 or bust. Things can shift where you don't have to make a certain number and you can give up more percentage or whatever. So there's some fee nuances with that one. And GoFundMe, I feel, is different, is the sense of like, you can put anything on GoFundMe. So it's like you're building your house for your new album next to somebody who's asking for help for a new car from their car crash, or paying for their arm to be fixed in the hospital from breaking their arm or whatnot. And it's just, you want to just look around to where it is. And we sort of tend to fall with Kickstarter because it specifically has a section for musicians and works and makes sense there. So with that being said, as we wrap up, I just want to take a moment to thank everybody and allow, everybody. Katie, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the panel. Chris, thank you so much. It was awesome to meet you and work with you. George, your project, congratulations at ending yesterday. You can now, you get to take a break and enjoy a sip of something nice if you'd like. Does anybody have anything they would like to share before we go?
Does anybody want to play?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Steve.
Does anybody want to play a song? I'm just kidding.
I wish we could, but we'll have to do that later. I would like to jump in and say a giant thank you to Steve and Jim, who have jam-packed this hour with so much information. Honestly, I feel like we could have gone on another 30 minutes and still not learned all of the ins and outs. Thank you also to Chris and Katie and George. This session will continue to be available as a recording on the Folk Alliance YouTube channel, and thank you to Craft Services for your sponsorship of this webinar. Our programming is made available to everyone on the planet, and if you would like to support Folk Alliance, we would love for you to consider making a donation. You can find the link there, folk.org/donate. On our website, you can also find upcoming webinars. Stay safe and connected, community. We're delighted that you've joined us, and you can reach Jim and Steve at hello@enjoycraftservices.com. And goodbye from Tressa at folk.org. We will see you all next time. Thanks, everybody.